Welcome to DivCasts from University of Chicago Divinity School. For more of our podcasts and information about our terms of use, please see our website, divinity.uchicago.edu/podcasts.
So welcome everybody. This is actually our first workshop of the quarter, which kind of has happened not on purpose, but this is a good one to start with. This is our craft of teaching offering for the year. Although we are co-sponsored by the New Testament Workshop, and we will early Christian literature, and we will be co-sponsoring another one then. So we actually have two. So today we'll be talking about teaching Bible with technology, and we have two of our own alumni who have graduated from the Bible program here. So without any further ado, I will turn over to Anne, and she'll introduce herself.
Remember to sign in.
Oh yes, remember to sign in, and the dean sends her regards.
I think I know almost everybody, but not quite everybody. So I'm Anne Knappel. I'm the bibliographer for religion and philosophy over at the Reg. So if you need help with a paper, you should come and follow up afterwards. I also am I graduated from the Div School. I have my MA and my PhD in Bible. I graduated in August 2011. And I just, I'll announce that I sent in my manuscript to be published with Eisenbrons at the end of the year. So soon enough, I will get to buy my own book, which will be fun. So Annette and I decided to split it up where I'm going to talk more about teaching in the classroom, using technology in the classroom, and she's going to talk more about teaching online, though we can have done both. So I'll talk for about half an hour, and she'll talk for about half an hour, and then we'll open up for discussion. But of course, feel free to interrupt with questions as they come up. All right. So first off, what does it mean to teach with technology? A book is technically technology, right? But we're not talking about that. We're talking more about electronic resources. And what are those? Those could be lots of different things. So they could be digitized content like ebooks or articles, reviews. They could be online databases like the ATLA database or Oxford companions online or full text collections online. They could be just online catalogs like Lens, which is soon to be replaced by Viewfind. If you didn't know that, that's happening. Citation management tools like Zotero or EndNote, or something like Chicago Manual of Style Online. If you haven't started using, you should use. It's awesome. Course management tools like Chalk. Open access web pages, like websites, blogs, social media, which starts getting, of course, very broad and very sticky and gray. And then things like software and apps like PowerPoint or Google Drive, Moodle, Accordance, BibleWorks. And I'd say I've incorporated all of these things into my teaching at some level, some much more than others. Really, PowerPoint is the thing that is the piece of technology that I think most permeates my teaching, but I try to use that PowerPoint to then access, to facilitate talking about these other things and bringing these other things into teaching. Also, we're talking about using electronic resources for teaching. It could mean broadly two different things, which is using them to teach the course, so how we're presenting the material to the students, or how we're using the resources to prep for the class, first of all, and then how we use it to present that material, and then versus teaching students how to use electronic resources, taking that as an opportunity to teach them about what's out there and how they use it, how it pertains to the subject matter at hand. And that's broadly how I'm going to divide up what I'm talking about today. So I'm going to go through and give some examples of how I've incorporated electronic resources into my teaching, and then talk some about some ideas I've had about how to teach students about electronic resources, how to teach them information literacy. And so when it comes to using electronic resources, there are 1,000,001 things out there that you can use. Like, so going back to my list, you may not have heard of everything on that list, and that's okay. So the question is and there are always going to be people out there who are using something different than you are. And if you're anything like me, the first time you hear that, your first reaction is just, oh crap, why don't I know what that is? So do I need to go out and learn it? And I just want to emphasize that I think it's really important when it comes to your teaching style that you need to, for the most part, it's probably good to stay within your comfort level. Now, you can push yourself a little bit, or you should push yourself a little bit, but you need to be thinking about things like, is this going to make me a better teacher? Or am I just doing this because I feel like I'm supposed to know how to use make a Prezi presentation versus a PowerPoint presentation? And if it's going to take you 8 hours to make a Prezi presentation versus half an hour to make a PowerPoint presentation, you should not be using Prezi. It's not that, you're not gaining anything from that. So again, that gets into also the issue of time investment versus benefit, both for you and the students. So is it, your time is precious, and their time is precious, and is it worth it for you to put in the extra time to use this? A lot of people, teachers are trying to take advantage of the fact that all students basically have smartphones and are texting and doing all sorts of stuff in class, so they're trying to get them to do assignments on their phones in class, which sounds great, but if it's going to take you, a month to figure out how to do that, maybe you can just let it go that students are going to occasionally text in your class and focus on a different format. So just some examples. I think, as you know, I'm sure innately, the great benefit of PowerPoint or whatever presentation software you're using is being able to use images in the classroom, and be able to manipulate those images and put images side by side. This is, you don't have to worry about students bringing the book to class because they probably won't. And so you can have it there to talk about, and you can use this to inform a discussion that is a lot harder to do if you have to either describe it to them or draw it. So it's another example of using images. So some classes. Again, though, some subject matters lend themselves to this better than others, right? So these two are from, I taught archaeology and the Bible. So obviously you're going to have lots and lots of images in that class. Another class, maybe images are not going to be as helpful. And that gets to another thing is don't force it, right? So, because students can tell. Another thing, for me, PowerPoint is great of being able to facilitate presenting complex ideas. So I stole this chart from Svi Abush, and I use this to try and convince my students to teach the source criticism and the documentary hypothesis, and about how text can evolve over time. And so I can use, the color coding, the showing, where the early stuff, how that shows up later, different stages. So this would be, obviously I'm not going to write that all on the chalkboard, right? That would be a nightmare, right, for them and for me. So. And you can, if you want to, you can get really, you can get fancier with this and, bring it in part by part, and do the cloud whoosh. Another example, a very simple way of just facilitating discussion is you can just throw a question up there, and then it's just there for you to reference and for them to read. And it's nice and big for them to see, right? Your handwriting might be really hard to read. So, other things I've looked at is more, sort of linking to things on the internet of, having images, and then what I did was, let's see if I'm gonna, it's worthwhile to show you this link, but. So I just had the image. I handed out printed out this article for them. And, it's not, it's just a press release. But we talked a little bit. So I showed them. They see these images, and then I give them the article to read, and then we talk about, do you agree with how this article has, specifically like this last line, while it's unknown if the bell belonged to one of the high priests, archaeologists have not ruled out the possibility, And hopefully, through some discussion, they realize this, some of the assumptions that are going on there. And also I'll say, on a side note, I got the idea for this assignment from a Facebook post, from somebody's Facebook post. That they posted that article and said, really? What about this bell makes it look like it was worn by a man, So I was like, oh, hey. So I think that's another way of, when I listed social media and websites and blogs on there, I think, for me at least, the way that figures into my teaching is more from the informing, getting ideas. I don't, I haven't really incorporated that into the classroom, but I think these are great outlets for discussion and, just thinking about things that you wouldn't otherwise. Another example is when I talk about the scrolls, I showed them the Dead Sea Scrolls collection online, the digital Dead Sea Scrolls, and these are great because you don't need to know Hebrew to appreciate this, right? You can just see right away. There's all sorts of stuff you can talk about here. You can talk about how they're sewn together. It's really easy to find places where they've, sort of additions and where they run out of space, the scribe ran out of space in the line, and you can talk about holes in the text, and so that's fun. And to a certain degree, it can be about keeping their attention. Especially with undergrads, they're this 18 to 21-year-olds. Their brains are literally not fully developed, right? And a lot of them are not majoring in humanities, and they're tired. They're tired. They work really hard. They play really hard, and they, sometimes you gotta. Show them some cool stuff, because they're not coming in thinking the Bible's really cool, even though we know it is. And then one last example, the British Museum of Art's got some really nice images on their website. So I think it's nice to show them, legitimate websites where they can get trusted information, right? And I'm going to talk more about that with designing assignments, but that's the thing that they don't understand for the most part, is they don't understand how to distinguish between good information and bad information, and good websites and bad websites. And so if you can sort of start to show them, just by showing it in class, you're legitimating it, you're authorizing it, and you're saying this is, the sort of things you can look for, and you can talk about that in class. You can, pull out things from the website to say, look at who's producing this and what sort of information they have. And so, and those are skills that, transcend the subject area, right? That can get them a job. So, and then quickly, just an example of a course site. Everybody has course sites now, and they all can do all sorts of fun things, but I tend to be very low-key on my course sites. But so like I teach this online Hebrew class where I just put together some notes for them, and then they follow along with a textbook, and then they post their homework online. But you can always, you can do quizzes on those, and there's advantages to those. You can see who's taken the quiz, how long it took them to take the quiz. Some of them allow you to take the quiz multiple times. Again, this comes to how much of your time do you want to put into it. But that's going to talk more about that. So moving to the second part. So yeah, just in general of designing assignments, things to think about of what do you want them to learn. A good vocab to know is learning outcome. So you don't have to like it, but you probably should know. Assessment, also a good term to know. But you start from what they learn and then you go backwards. I find that, for me, I find that a helpful way of designing an assignment. So if the assignment is you want them to gain information on, to understand that the information on the web requires authentication. And so from that, and that's the skill is evaluating the content, and the content is a Google search. And this gets back to, in my mind, at least for undergrads, in a lot of ways it comes down to teaching information literacy. It comes down to teaching them when they need to know information, where to find it, how to access it and evaluate it, how to incorporate it into the work, evaluate and improve the process for future inquiry, all within the bounds of proper legal and ethical guidelines. If all of my undergrad students, knew that, I would be really happy, but most of them don't, right? They just, they just don't get it, they're lost. And so I think if you can, the things that they know some things are very sophisticated, like maybe they can make really great YouTube videos, but, have, no idea why Wikipedia may not be a great source of information, so start helping them build more sophisticated understanding of information on the web. So I actually have never assigned this assignment, but I came up with it as an example of. So there's a study done by EDUCAUSE of undergraduates, and actually it mimicked the same results came from the library did a survey of undergrads here a couple years back, and also found that Google and Chalk, or in this case Blackboard, were the websites that students use the most. So, I think, and then JSTOR I think is third. So that's good news. So that's how they find stuff. They Google it, or it's given to them, right, by their professors. So they need some help on how to find stuff, and especially articles. They tend to be better at finding books, but articles they got no clue about. So the assignment I came up with was to do a search for King David in whatever search engine you use, and describe what you find, and basically describe the different pages. So who's responsible for this information, where did they get it, what is the purpose of the website, when was it last updated, do you believe the information is accurate, why or why not. And I think just, some things they're going to, so see, here's what you get if you Google King David. some of this stuff, they're not going to be able to give an answer, to, who's responsible for this information. Some of it is just there, right? And that's part of, getting them to see that, maybe they can't trust it if the person will put their name on it, right? But then even also they'll see, so the third one down, the Jewish Virtual Library, this looks pretty good, right? It's got someone's name on it, it's a library, but it's basically, a summary of the Bible. And also if you look at the sources, so if I remember correctly, the Barbara Cohen biography is actually for juveniles, or for teenagers, and then the Encyclopedia Judaica just links you to Amazon, and then it just lists, Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles as you're on there. So there's, something, that's a great place to get started talking with students about, what do you think about these sources? What, how reliable is that? And then also the group that's responsible for the website is the American Israeli Cooperative Enterprise, whose nonprofit, nonpartisan organization strengthen U.S.-Israel relationship by emphasizing the fundamentals of alliance. That's great, but that's not really what you're looking for if you're looking for scholarly sources, right? So these things to key students into. And then also, another thing to think about with assignments, and this is something that I've always struggled with, is I get so focused on one assignment and then I sort of forget to follow up. But I think it's really important to follow up and to link assignments so that they start seeing a context to them. And so I thought you could design then a second stage to the assignment would be then to pick one of those sites. Like you could pick the virtual library site, and you have to go and validate that information. And you do that by going and finding scholarly sources. And this is then where you can teach them how they go about finding them, and you can talk to them about, why stuff that you access through this website is different than stuff that you access through Google. And if I may give a plug for librarians everywhere, I think also that you should really be talking to the libraries at the schools that you're teaching at. For a couple of different reasons. I mean, for most of you, the first teaching you're going to be doing is going to be adjuncting, which, for better or for worse, they kind of just let you go, and nobody's checking up on you. And so that's not necessarily bad, but it does mean that you might not know. You're just not going to know how things work on that campus, and the librarians can help you figure out how things work, how the library works. But also, they're going to, everything's a little bit different on each campus, so you can't assume that how you've used stuff here is how those students are going to access stuff at their university. And also most of, we have a lot of stuff. We have access to a lot of stuff, proportionally more than other institutions. So it's also quite possible that you'll be telling them to go get something that they don't have access to. So that'd save you a little bit of embarrassment. So I think that it's actually, it's 5 o'clock, so so right on half an hour. Jordan.
It seems like in these assignments you're describing a situation where you're lecturing about how to use the internet. Mm-hmm. And it just so happens you're using David, mm-hmm. for example, as your muse. The opposite is usually the case. You're trying to teach something, mm-hmm. and by the way, they need to know. Mm-hmm. Do you devote a whole lecture to just the beginning of the course, just let's get this over with? Well, you don't know how to use the internet, and I'm going to teach you? Is it something you get to when you're
this is
signing
something.
A paper?
Yeah, this is something that I would think would come later. But that's the nice thing about the follow-up too, is that then there actually is content. That's teaching them content. That's forcing them to go and read at least the Anchor Bible Dictionary Entry to King David, right? But that was an ongoing, a perennial issue for me teaching undergrads, was what do you prioritize, the content or the skills? Because there were always a few students in class who ate up the content. They loved the content. They could have just sat there and talked about the Bible all day long, but the majority of them, maybe do the readings, and they just, I just didn't feel like I was, I just didn't feel like I was making much of an impact when I focused, at least exclusively on the content. That it had to be something else. It had to give them some hook to their lives, because even something like like the composition of the Bible, where I feel like that has so many vast implications for how human beings think and create, and I still just couldn't really, and maybe this was just something that would have come with time on teaching, but I just felt like a lot of students that just not that excited about it. And so, but they can get more excited about it when it's a Google search, and it gives them a way to connect with them that they wouldn't otherwise, in my experience. So, but it's an issue. But again, this gets back to adjunct teaching. Nobody's keeping track of whether you're teaching content or Google searches, So.
I guess I would ask a slightly different question.
Yeah.
You wouldn't suggest just giving them what you think is relevant for a course and saying, write reflections based on this, and just forget about releasing them to go do their own research. You think you need to keep their interest, you're saying, by sending them to Google?
Yes, I don't understand the question.
Why? I mean, we're talking about the struggles of them knowing how to use the
Right.
internet correctly. Why send them to use the internet at all? Why not just tell them, what's relevant? Give them 20 articles to read, or a couple of books that
Yeah.
they're not gonna take it all in anyway. So just give them something that you trust.
Yeah.
And leave this to someone else.
Honestly, Jordan, you want to? I think that sounds like a good class too. I think there are things that they can learn that way too, because then you can focus it on analysis, and I think I found it. I enjoy teaching students I guess it's teaching them how to fish. I mean, the analysis is teaching them how to fish too. But I guess I feel like this is it's an important thing for them to know, just to be good contemporary citizens. So there's that.
I think that's a good answer.
All right. Yeah. Should we switch? Yeah.
Change over computers. Should I plug it from this also, or just?
It shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be loose.
Something about.
And do you think you can make those slides available?
Of course.
That would be great.
There's a computer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did it before?
We can link it to the Hebrew Bible Workshop website.
That's the,
It will also be linked on the multimedia website. Where the video for that.
Great.
switch.
Oh, here, duplicate.
Magic!
Somebody got it.
Nothing, on our student course evaluations, they always have, the technological aspects of this course went well. Really bad. My name's Annette Heisinger. I graduated with a degree in biblical studies, but focused on the New Testament in 2010. I'm teaching at the University of Dubuque Theological Seminary, which means I have mostly master's level students who are professional students, as well as some continuing education students, and a few undergraduate courses because my seminary is trying to make itself meaningful and relevant to the undergraduate program so that they won't close down our program. So I've been teaching there for 5.5 years, and I was just counting, I think I've taught about maybe 12 courses that were entirely online. So I don't see the students during the semester. But we have a program that's called a hybrid program, which is our accreditation agency, the Association of Theological Schools, started out with this so that the students have to complete 1/3 of their courses on campus, and we do that by offering 2 intensives, one in August and one in January. So we meet the students in these intensives, but then we don't see them, for the entire 15-week semester. So I'll talk just a little bit about those courses in particular, although what's happened is I started using technology more in my residential courses as well, primarily for things that are sort of logistical, like upload your paper here, because I got tired of juggling paper, and I'm also driving back and forth between Dubuque and Chicago once a week, so if they've uploaded it to the website, then I've got everything centralized and I don't have to think about it. So I stole these 3 things: teacher presence, design elements, and group interactions from colleagues of mine. When I started at the seminary, there had been 1 year where we had taught online classes, and they brought in 4 faculty members because they knew this part of the program was going to be expanding, and they told us all, you're going to be teaching online from the get-go. And then they gave us nothing to go on. And by February of that year, they said, oh, we have to have a workshop. How about the 2 of you who are new, you teach the first workshop, and then the 2 more of you who are new teach the second one. So my friends in the Hebrew Bible came up with this thing of teacher presence, design elements, and group interactions as their sort of thing that they were looking at. And one of the things you have to think about ahead of time is, how are you going to communicate who you are and what you are about and what's your role in this group of people that you can't see. We tape ourselves, but we don't do anything in real time. So you have to figure out, how are you going to offer this? I'm doing my fancy movie animation thing, right? I had to learn how to do PowerPoint from basic. I didn't know anything about it when I left here, so. How are you going to offer information? Now, University of Chicago, my impression is that many professors lecture, and this is preferred at my school also. People who've been teaching a long time, this is what they prefer to do: lecture for like an hour or an hour and a quarter, whichever, for the class, and then have 5 minutes for discussion, and then everybody goes home. For them, it's great. All they have to do is tape their lecture, right, and post it on there. But I tend not to lecture. I tend to do lecturettes, as Dean Mitchell used to call them, or mini lectures. Of course, those always tended to be 45 minutes. But anyway, so I had to come up with this way of doing this hybrid kind of thing online. And you have to think about each element you do in a classroom. What are you trying to do when you're online? So you have obviously options of audio and/or audio-visual kinds of things, and then that was our first thing. So, like, how do you prepare for taping? I can tell you, nothing was worse for me in the entire history of my career here at the University of Chicago than watching the first lecture I taped and looked at myself and said, why am I moving my hands so much? What is happening with my hair? That color is not going to work. So, and then you realize you're not looking at the camera, you're sort of looking down and around, and it's just, I don't know how anybody does news on TV. So, but it helped me to think about the class and then to begin looking at the camera. And we often had audio issues that were going on that were just frustrating. I had to watch my clothing. I'm going to show you an example of that. You have to watch the length of the presentation. We were given a few little articles, I should say, that would say, modern people can't listen for more than half an hour. Your lectures must be less than half an hour. Is that true or what? What is the laughter?
It's true since time immemorial.
Okay,
It's
so
never
just
changed.
modern people. Okay, great. So when they said this to all my faculty, everybody was like freaking out because they had these hour-long lectures and were very happy with the fact that they were only supposed to lecture for 30 minutes. So here, let me show you some of the things that I think these will come up here. I hope it doesn't blast us out. But this is what they see now. They can switch back and forth. Audio button up here.
It might be underneath. Yeah.
Well, whatever. You can't see me. That's all right. Anyway, so they have a choice on this one of moving this around. This is Camtasia, and you can switch it. You can make it big, so they're seeing the PowerPoint. Woohoo! So this is in a studio. We have a studio that a little tiny closet of a room that has a camera like this set up in it, and then you sit in there at a desk with the PowerPoint on a screen next to you, and then they see the PowerPoint, but they can't see you moving anything on the PowerPoint, so they can't see the cursor, and you have to say things like, on the second line of this paradigm of this verb, you will see blah, 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 right? So that's a little frustrating. But it's a sort of a soundproof room. We have a tech person who's really fabulous and who gets you set up for that. All right, let me see. I don't know what that's about anymore. Let's take that down. All right, here's one in the classroom. So sometimes we're teaching concurrently
we're going to start here at Massey 3-1.
in the classroom
We know some of these words now.
and in the online. So sometimes some of the students who are online like this better than that studio thing. They like to be able to see what you're doing. It feels more informal to them. Of course, it takes longer, but they can speed it up if they want to. They hear more jokes that way, probably. And then here's what I had with this unfortunate clothing choice. This one student emailed me after this and was like, "Stop! Don't ever wear that jacket again." I don't know if you can tell, but on her computer screen, it's like wiggling, right? It's like all these things you have to think about. It's somewhat frustrating. Okay. So these are things that, if you are afraid of failure, this is not a good thing for you to do. You have, and she actually emailed me another time about another jacket, which I told her I wasn't going to get rid of. And this one I took home. All right, so I use a lot of PowerPoint. As Ann said, I try to use, unlike this PowerPoint, I try to use images over text for most of my things to try to keep these students invested. The one where they found the really Christian church. I found you have to really watch photo clarity, which I don't know if you ever worked with that when you're downloading an image from the internet, and try to keep it clean. Try to minimize reading the slide text, right? and either expand on it or make the text on the slide smaller. None of these ideas are original to me. I looked it up on how to make a good PowerPoint. And then try to keep things consistent, which for some reason, some of these things would not do for me today, so I don't know how to do that. My students in New Testament really have all had Greek, and so they really enjoy this kind of stuff that has Greek letters that we can actually try to decipher, the same way that you had with the Asherah inscription. So I use a lot of that, even though they're master's level students. All right, and this is just about the PowerPoint. I'm going to talk a little about consistency on the website. The other thing you have to think of about teacher presence is how are you going to respond to the online students? Because you can't respond to them because they're not in the classroom. Duh. So I say, and sometimes when I'm in the classroom, if I'm taping one of the classroom presentations, I'll say, now distance students, you need to da-da-da. And they seem to enjoy just being recognized that they're out there. Some of the residential students, we call them distance students and residential students instead of online. I guess there's some negative, right, vibe with the idea of Phoenix University and those kind of places. So we say distance and residential. And so anyway, one thing I often wonder, do they ever read anything that I write? So I try to keep it, I figure, why should I make it hard for them? I keep it very, very short. I do a variety of kind of responses. I'm going to show you a few of those in a minute. I try to mention the students by name, and I try to take whichever audience I'm working with into account, whether it's undergrads or whatever. So this is a 2-page response that I write up after they've written a whole bunch of stuff on a forum. I read through it. This is the pain in the butt part of teaching online, is that you get to the end of a week and you think you're done, but you're not done. So I have colleagues who will spend Saturday mornings reading over all the responses that the distance students have written, and then they write down the notes of them, and then they try to make a response. So you can make a written response, or you can, I have other friends who just tape an audio response with a microphone connected to their computer. We use this Camtasia thing where I can record myself from the computer. And anyway, that's one thing I do. I try not to make it any longer than 2 pages. Sometimes I go into the website. This is Moodle software. We use it because it's free. And so I asked them to write a 1-paragraph response or 2 paragraphs in responding to scholarship. And then I went in the middle of the week and just sort of checked and wrote little, 2-sentence things. I like what you said about blah, blah, blah. Have you thought blah, blah, blah? Nothing, except it just lets them know I'm lurking there reading this stuff, right? They don't. So here is one that I wrote for this one guy, David. He doesn't want to have him up there. You need to explain to them up front the same kind of things that you would explain in a classroom, but it's more important this time. How are you going to do this class discussion? You need to say, I'm not going to respond to each person individually every week. You need to say that, because some people will feel hurt if you don't respond to them every week. And then you have to find out, are they texters, are they emailers, are they, what kind of, or you need to decide what you are and tell them how you're going to communicate with them. I usually put my cell phone number on here, and for the distance students who are in our master's program, I tell them that they're free to call me. That doesn't mean I have an answer, but they're free to call me if they have a question like about a Greek paradigm or something. They never do, but it makes them feel better that they never do. And then you also need to remember that responding to the messages, this is true for everybody too, right? You need to respond as quickly as you can. And our rule of thumb at our school is within 24 hours, like to email or phone call or whatever. And you also need to tell them how often you're checking the web page. With this continuing ed course, which is about the equivalent of a 1 credit hour course, it's like I check it like twice a week, When I first started this, I checked all the web pages obsessively, 5 times a day. It's like my Facebook page or something. I was constantly on there looking. What are people saying? What are they doing? It was really, really difficult. But I'm not doing that anymore. Whoops. Figure out how quickly you're going to read the papers. That was another thing. I never understood why professors took so long to get my papers back to me. What is wrong? Well, it's because they've got 20 papers, right? All the same stuff, and it's not that much fun to read it. But the students really appreciate it, and you get higher student evaluations if you provide. This is important if you're going in at the lower level, lower rank position, adjunct or whatever. You get better evaluations from the students if you respond more quickly. Who would have thought? And the other thing is sometimes the students would ask me questions like, I can't get this to work. And I'm like, what do I know? So if you're adjunct, you have to find out who that tech support person is at your institution and make friends with them. Because when I taught at CTU as an adjunct, there was a really good tech guy, but he didn't really care about me because I was just an adjunct. And I kept trying to ask him questions and he was never around. It was really frustrating. But so keep at it, because there probably is somebody there who can help. And I don't know what that means exactly. Let me think. Oh, just sort of thinking through your audience, what is it that people need? As Ann was saying, undergrads there's a need to, I think, change activities almost throughout the classroom and on the online site as well. Whereas, graduate students can be more text-oriented and do some of that analysis without you holding their hands. At any rate, let me talk about design elements of a web page. Yeah, this is what I was told. Make it user-friendly. Who knows how to do that exactly? Attractive and consistent, and keep the assignment sequence the same, like every week. Most of these are set up week by week. There's a block for each week. I usually don't open the block. I keep it hidden. Does Blackboard have a thing like that? Okay, so I keep it hidden because I don't want them to either worry about what's coming ahead or jump ahead and do stuff. I'm very controlling. So I keep the assignment sequence the same. And let's see if we can go back to this again. Oh, I also had this thing where for New Testament Greek, I started out each lecture with music. Am I signed in? I'm not logged in. I was for a minute. I know you're excited to hear this music. And it's sort of funny. I thought, well, this is sort of dorky, but a friend of mine told me he had been using The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly as an introduction to polity courses lectures, and I thought, oh, I can find something better than that. So let's see if this... You probably can't hear it. It's Nickel Creek. It's a thing by Nickel Creek. Anyway, and so then this is in the studio. This is one of the studio things. You can't hear it. Anyway, but the students were all very excited about it, and they later did a
We're going to spend most of our
YouTube thing
all of our time
that used that and showed them with their Croy textbook,
until January, so you don't have to worry about
all standing there listening to the music. All right, let's go back.
it. Okay, so they are all
There we go. And what is my next thing? Oh, so another thing to do is to make links to these websites at the top of each. This Camtasia thing comes up all the time. It drives me nuts. Let me go back to that. I am not very, I know how to do a few things, and it impresses. Oh, by the way, if you do a PowerPoint, it's incredibly impressive to older faculty members, longtime faculty members at whatever institution you're applying to. I will tell you that. They're like, wow. So I always, I dial these up because I just think, well, why not, right? And so I usually use text, some kind of text-based thing, and if you click on the picture of that, it sends you to this is from Earlham College. It's similar. I always send them to an academic or museum kind of website where they can learn a little something more, and I did that for each one of the weeks. So you've got Romans here and Mark, something of Mark here. So, but at the top of each page, I put all the sort of course materials. These were not all opened at the beginning. So I have the We Sing Bible songs. There's one for the Hebrew Bible and one, for the Protestant Hebrew Bible, whatever. And then I also, this is the text we're using, Introducing the New Testament by Mark Allen Powell. And there's a publisher's webpage that you can go to, and there's all kinds of stuff with that. And then there's, I don't have these links entirely well done, you're supposed to be able to, so they open in a different place. And then the New Testament Gateway site, I put that on there. I had them do a big research paper that Anne's work would be very helpful with. I've got to think about that next time I teach this class. Writing a newspaper for the cities of Paul. They get assigned to a city of Paul, and they have to write a newspaper. So they have to look into the archaeology. Look into the archaeology. And this is where our librarian, they work as a team. I stole this actually from Dean Mitchell. She used to do this at McCormick Seminary. And I tell them somewhere where to find the resources. by not just going to Wikipedia. Oh, yeah, I give them a long list of approved resources and websites. But then the library makes a special tab on their thing as well, and I can send them to that, which the library has taken down right now. All right. This question place, people put in all kinds of random things there. You know, whatever. That's another way of sort of hanging out with them. All right, let me see if there's anything else. All right, the other thing you have to think about is group interactions. Now, some classes don't require a lot of group interaction, right? You come in, especially at a doctoral level, you come in, you do your work, you write your paper, and you leave, right? But with a lot of these other things, group interactions actually help some people. They don't help every student, but they help some people. So it's important to think for your group of people what kinds of things are going to aid in learning and how are you going to do this online, right? And then also, what kinds of things are you willing to spend your time looking at for grades? Have you ever, anybody taken an online course where you had to respond to a question? Usually what my colleagues do, which I stopped doing because it was too annoying to me, was they'll post a question from the professor that relates to the reading, ask every student to respond to it, then ask every student to respond to 4 or 5 other people's responses 3 days later. So of course, if on the first round of postings, a student has not responded, then there's not time to respond to 4 or 5 by the end of the week. So everybody gets, it's sort of like a, you know, one of those domino things like with plane flights and stuff. You just can't, everybody can't get it done. And then at the end of the semester, if you've made 1 posting every week, and then 4 additional postings every week, somebody has to go into the database of the software and figure out if that student did all the work. This is a good thing for a teaching assistant to do. That's what I decided. But I decided I don't really care if they respond to each other because usually they just say things like, "That's really nice, thanks." You know, and it doesn't really, to me, get the learning across. Whereas if I ask a really focused question about a reading, something like which of the 5 discourses in the Gospel of Matthew is important for you or for your religious community or for your school or something like that, then I get a chance for each of them to think creatively about it and integratively and just post it. And they don't have to write about what other people said. You know, if you ever have that happen in the classroom, right? If you ask a student, there's not like there's a lot of responding going on to other students in the classroom. Anyway, so this group interaction thing, I'm sort of, I guess I'm ambivalent about it. And then also you have to decide what is your attendance policy. This is this sort of thing. Our school has an attendance policy. If you haven't logged on for 2 weeks, you're considered withdrawn from the course. So you need to find out if that's a policy if you're going to teach an online course. Because it's like they haven't shown up for class for 2 weeks, right? So that's essentially what it means. And then you have to decide if somebody, I had one student tell me that she took spring break to drive to Disneyland World with her kids and her husband, and she had to do all the driving because she gets car sick when she sits in the passenger seat, so she couldn't do the reading and the responding in the appropriate time. It's like, whatever. That is just so annoying. So anyway, so there are different kinds of question and answer forums, right? So I tend to go with it. I ask the question and the students provide an answer. I often do that. This is helpful. You can see if they've done the reading. And the good thing about this is nearly, I would say 95% of the distance students that I've had have done the readings. At least they've picked up 1 or 2 things that maybe they've just looked at the conclusion. I don't know. But you can tell that they've done it. Whereas that doesn't happen in the residential classroom. Plus, then they can have a considered response because they have the time to write something instead of just in a classroom when the extroverts and the quick thinkers can sort of say something and then the introverts are sitting around thinking 20 minutes later that they had something to say. I use this as a part of my class participation grade. I just figure I might as well, right? The other thing is that students can ask a question and the teacher can answer, right? That's a different dynamic that happens there, and you have to think about whether that would be helpful. I think if you, instead of just having them say, I usually say you can't ask the question what does this word mean, right? They have to ask a more significant question than that. And I sometimes then take those questions, if I'm teaching concurrently, into the classroom. I'll pick them off the website, go into the classroom and say, Carol asked this question, I want to talk about it. And that sort of integrates our student body. The students can question and answer each other, which if you're interested in this idea of having a cohort, you can do that. It also allows them to feel like they know something, right? And that can be a kind of thing where they can write a review of a book and post that and then ask questions for the students to answer. I do that sometimes as well. All right, so here's what, we have this coffee house thing that they put on every single website. That's, again, just sort of a random stuff. Some of it requires my response and some of it doesn't. We're in a seminary, people always put prayer concerns up on this. But we also have new reading assignments as well. I've done chats in the past, typing chats. Those are really odd, and I don't know, they don't work for me, right? Because it's just people typing at each other. I have a feeling those have gone the way of all flesh, but maybe not. We do have some Skyping capability, but I haven't done that. The students don't seem to care if we do that, so I don't tend to do it. We try to get study partners. Sometimes we'll say, you have to have a study partner and have a phone call with that person, especially for the language classes, both Hebrew and Greek, we do this. And then I do quizzes. This is a random thing. This has nothing to do with those other three things. I just thought you might want to see how a quiz looks. It is very time consuming to put the quizzes on the website, but once they're there, they're there. And then you can import them year after year after year, and it helps with the grading quite a bit. And it helps the students get used to using the Greek font. You know, there's all kinds of things that it helps with. So it was my Hebrew Bible colleague who spent all summer doing it once for Hebrew. He said, you really have to do this. No. So, you know, the problem is that people will spell things wrong, right? They'll say, I don't know, these aren't too bad, but sometimes they'll spell something wrong and then it'll get marked wrong. You have to go in and check everything. A lot of the stuff that happens with technology with the distant students is you have to hold their hand and say, it's okay. I don't want the technology to get interfere with your learning. If you feel for some reason that I haven't received your paper, send it to me as an email attachment. If you feel for some reason that your quiz didn't upload, send me an email. And especially the first few weeks, people can't figure this stuff out. So, all right, so here's my thing. You've got to figure out whether you're going to do that lecture business. I'll just say that. I say recycle lectures. That's recycling the taped lectures. That's good too for those distance courses. In a way, for me, online learning was a way to be more creative in my teaching and to try to think differently about what it was I wanted the students to come away with. How did I want them to learn how to analyze secondary literature? And how could they find a thesis statement? I go to some of those kind of skills. What's the thesis statement? Sometimes the thesis statement in biblical studies essays are not really well constructed, right? And then I give them hints about ignoring footnotes and, you know, moving to conclusions and things like that. But it helped me be more creative to think about what am I going to do when I'm not there to mediate between them and the text that they're studying. And you only have to stay a step or two ahead of them. And you only have to know enough technology to be sort of in the middle of the pack is how I feel about it. You know, there's no way that I'm like, I don't know what Prezi even is, so I'm not going to try not to worry about that right now. But it's enough, especially with my audience. I've never, the last semester, I had a 74-year-old taking my class. So I've never been the oldest person in the class. I've never been the dumbest person in a class. So if you stay a step or two ahead, like in a regular classroom, you're fine. I like to elicit student feedback, like 2 or 3 weeks in, you know, what's annoying, what's not annoying, and by the time I've taught Greek now 3 times online, I feel like I've got a lot of those bugs sort of worked out. And I love teaching Greek online because you never see these students going, you know, like you do in a classroom. They're not slumping down, they don't have their hoods pulled over their heads and stuff. So if they're having meltdowns, I don't have to know about it. That's good. And then, look at that. Find a helpful librarian. Our librarians are fabulous because we got cited at their last accreditation visit about 6 years ago that the library didn't seem as focused on the seminaries it did on the undergrads. So our library is like librarians are falling over themselves to be helpful to us. Ordering books, they will scan things for the distance students. They'll put them on the website for the distance students. The distance students can call them for stuff. And I can't say enough about the responsiveness of librarians in all of this. And then a tech support person also. Yeah.
We thank you for listening to or viewing our podcast. For more information and for other podcasts, please see our website, divinity.uchicago.edu/podcasts. Copyright, the University of Chicago Divinity School.